Hi, in this video, let's create a simple scroll to top button using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Here in my HTML file, all I have is some content. So I've added a div with the class of content, and inside this div, I've added an h1 and I have a bunch of paragraphs and h2s. At the very bottom, just below this div, I've added a button and I've given it a class of toTop. This will be a scroll to top button, and that's all we require for the HTML. Now let's go to our CSS file and add some styles. Here I've already added a basic reset. Now I'll select the body and I'll give it a background color of 7A 5D 6B, and I'll also choose a font of Verdana. Now let's give the div with the class of content a few styles. First, we'll set the width to 50%. We'll change the background color to F4, F4, F4. Next, we'll give it a margin of 0 to the top and bottom, auto to the left and the right. We'll give it a padding of 1 rem to the top and the bottom, 1.5 rem to the left and the right. Now let's choose the h1s and the h2s within our content div. We'll also choose the h2s. We'll give them a margin of 1.5 rem to the top, 0 to the left and the right, and 0.5 rem to the bottom. Also, let's increase the line height of all the paragraphs to 1.5 rem. Now let's start styling the scroll to top button. We'll select the button with the class of toTop. We'll remove all the default styles, so we'll use the all property and set its value to initial. Next, we'll give it a height of 50 pixel. We'll give it a width of 50 pixel. We'll give it a background color of DA5E53. We'll give it a border radius of 50%. Right now our button is at the bottom left. We want to place it somewhere at the bottom right. So let's do that. First, we'll give it a position of fixed. We'll position it at a distance of 1 rem from the right and 1 rem from the bottom. Now let's have a look in the browser, and as you can see, the button is now at the bottom right, and this button has a fixed position. That means even if I scroll, the button remains at the bottom right. Now let's enter the text within the button. So we'll use the display of flex. We'll say justify content to the center, align items to the center. Also, let's increase the font size to 1.1 rem. We'll change the cursor to pointer, and we'll choose a font family of Verdana. Now we want this button to be displayed only when the user has scrolled down a certain amount. So by default, we want the button to be hidden. You can use the display property to hide the button. However, in this video, I'll be using the opacity property so that we are able to add some transitions to the button. So for now, let's set the opacity to 0. For now, that's all the CSS we need. Now let's start working on the JavaScript. First, let's select the button. So I'll create a const named toTop, and we'll say document.querySelector, and we'll select the class of toTop. Now we'll select the window object and we'll add an event listener of scroll, and we'll run a function. Here we'll be using the if-else statement. Now what we're trying to achieve is, if the user has scrolled more than 40 pixels, we want the button to be visible, else we want to hide it. So let's do that. We'll say if, and we'll select the window object and we'll apply the scroll y property. Now the scroll y property returns the number of pixels scrolled vertically on the document. So in our case, we want it to be more than 40 pixels. Now if the user has scrolled more than 40 pixels, we want to change the opacity of the button back to 1. So let's do that. So we'll say toTop style dot opacity is equal to 1. And if the user has not scrolled more than 40 pixels, we want the opacity to remain 0. So for that we'll use the else statement. We'll say toTop style dot opacity is equal to 0. Now let's check it in our browser. You can see as soon as I scroll down and reach more than 40 pixels, the button becomes visible. And as soon as I scroll up and reach to the very top, the button disappears. And that's exactly what we want. Now that we've added some JavaScript to our button, let's go back to our CSS file and add some transition. So to our button element, we'll add the transition. We want the opacity property to transition. The duration will be 0.3 seconds. And the timing function will be linear. Now let's check it in the browser. And that's exactly what we want. Also, let's change the color of the text to white. And that is it. The next thing we want to do is we want our scroll to top button to work. That means when we click on the button, we want the button to take us to the very top. So let's do that. We'll go back to our JavaScript file. At the very bottom, we'll select the button and we'll add an event listener. This time we are looking for the click event and we'll run a function. We'll select the window object and we'll add the scroll to method. Now the scroll to method takes two parameters, the x coordinate and the y coordinate. Now in our case, we want to move to the very top. So the x will be 0 and the y will also be 0. So let's do that. The x will be 0 and the y will also be 0. Now let's check it in the browser. I'll scroll at the very bottom. And when I click on the button, you can see it takes me to the very top. Let's do it once again. I'll scroll to the very bottom. And when I click on the button, it takes me to the very top. Now the only problem is when I click on the button, it instantly takes me to the very top. However, we want the scrolling to be smooth. So let's go to our CSS file and add the scroll behavior. So we'll go to our CSS file. At the very top, just above the body, we'll select HTML and we'll set the scroll behavior to smooth. Now let's check it in the browser. I'll scroll to the very bottom and when I click on the button, it takes me to the very top, and this time the scrolling is smooth. And that is exactly what we're trying to achieve. So this is how you create a simple scroll to top button using HTML, CSS and just a few lines of JavaScript. So that's it for this video. Hope you like it. I'll see you in another one. Till then, have a nice day.